So, how has everything been so far? Are we having a good time? One of the things that I really just wanted to say real quick to folks, if you are appreciating or enjoying any of this information, we work really, really hard putting together Pathfinder for you. We're supported by Upfield that generously makes all of this free for you to participate. So I really, really appreciate sharing this out. If you're enjoying today's content, some of the speakers we have, like these, this is like tens of thousands of dollars that some of these talks would normally be. And we provide it completely free to the community because we want to help grow more and more founders and entrepreneurs and show people why they should invest and build in the future of food. So any shares on Vegan Women's Summit on social media, tell people about what we do is really, really important. Thank you. Okay, so we have another speaker that let's bring up, Rochelle. We're going to be diving back into building a company. So now we know everything about what's going on in the space. Rochelle, how are you? How are you feeling?
I'm hanging in there. I've had a little bit of a cold, but I'm pushing through it, and I couldn't be happier to be here with this great community. So thanks so much for having me.
Okay, so Rochelle's here from Glasswell Syndicate. They are some of the top when it comes to expertise of how to build your pitch. This is a conversation you're not going to want to miss because this was one of our most popular ones 2 years ago when Macy first did it from Glasswell. You need to learn how to make a good pitch deck. So I'm going to hop off stage and I will let Rochelle take it away.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jenny. Awesome. Well, hello everyone. I am thrilled to be here. What a great event and something that I love talking about. So we're going to be talking about perfecting the pitch, and specifically kind of standing out in difficult fundraising environments. I am a little bit sick. I'm recovering from a cold, so happy to be here, but I will be taking a couple pauses for sips of tea. So we'll get through it together. My name is Rochelle. I'm the operations analyst at Glasswell Syndicate. Glasswell is a 501c6 nonprofit within the plant and cell-based investment space. We're largely focused on supporting investors and entrepreneurs by fostering partnerships that will help provide products and services that remove animals from the consumer supply chain. So these are largely companies working on alt protein products, but also in the next gen material space and alternatives to animal testing technologies. Within Glasswell, we have two sort of investment arms. For the purposes of today's call, I'll be focused on our early stage arm, but I will call out that earlier this year, we launched the Emerging Growth Consortium in partnership with the Good Food Institute, which is really the first organized body of professionals from across the globe focused on the acceleration of emerging growth all protein companies. So I will have a slide at the end of this presentation with some more information with an email address so that if you're a growth stage investor, entrepreneur, and want to learn more about that initiative, you definitely can. Our early stage arm supports a community of VCs, foundations, trusts, and high net worth individuals who are focused on early stage mission aligned investment opportunities. We provide a variety of benefits for members, but most importantly for this presentation, we really focus on highly curated deal flow and bringing that to our investment members. So we provide this deal flow in two main ways. The first being our Glasswell Syndicate Pitch Showcase events. So we put these on bi-monthly, and they feature highly curated companies. Our second is our deal flow board, which is a little bit less curation and offers investors the opportunity to see a wider variety of deals across stages and including adjacent industries. Since inception, Glasswell Syndicate has hosted over 40 of these pitch showcase events. We've featured hundreds of deals in our weekly highlights newsletters and on our deal flow board, and overall reviewed thousands of pitch decks. So really, we have seen it all, and we have a lot of experience reviewing decks, hearing feedback from investors, and really seeing what companies make it through the VC funnel in real time. So when I see the VC funnel, this is kind of represented on this photo here. A typical VC funnel represents the company a firm talks to down to who they actually write a check for. So on average, out of about 1,000 companies, a partner will end up investing in only about 3 to 4 of them on a yearly basis, meaning less than a single percent actually receive VC financing. Furthermore, I'm sure many of you on the call know that this is a typical or atypical economic climate, it's been very difficult to receive VC financing. So I just bring this up not to be a downer, but to say that it's more important than ever to stand out. So we've really tailored this workshop to highlight things that you can do in your deck to stand out to investors in the space, and to ultimately get into the percent funded category. So we'll really be sharing key insights from how Gospel Syndicate startups have gotten there and how you can adapt to stand out particularly. So it all starts with a pitch. And we say effective pitch because it's one thing to have a strong pitch. It's another to have a strong pitch that gets you to active diligence. So that's what we say by effective pitch. And of course, we'll be spending the most of our time talking about the deck, but there are other really key components that are part of building an effective pitch, such as the presentation, which is really a critical time to build credibility with investors, curating your audience, so spending your time wisely to target an audience that makes sense, that are aligned with your business proposition, and also using your network wisely, remembering that VCs talk and not to burn any bridges. So we'll get into kind of the deck. Before the investor meets you, they'll likely be judging your business off of your deck. So it's critical that your deck, one, draws them in, and two, contains all of the key information they need to determine if it's a fit for their firm. So this is actually the list that we send out to entrepreneurs who are selected for a Glasswell pitch event. And we find that a lot of times companies are missing one or more of these really key elements. So I added this in as a resource for you. I'm not going to go through it in entirety, but this deck will be available to anyone in the audience who wants to have it as a resource following the presentation. Getting a little more granular on the deck, on average, investors spend about 3 minutes per pitch deck. So it's really critical that you choose your slide order intentionally so that you're giving really important information in a digestible way. The first few slides are critical. Try and remember that you're simultaneously trying to clearly and concisely explain A, what your company does and why it's a necessary product and service, and also why you are standing out as a financially backable business. The title and the cover page is your opportunity to kind of think about what your business is in a photo. So think about like what your service is, what your business is, and use that as kind of a powerful image to start you off, and a memorable tagline that hopefully the investor will be thinking about even after your presentation. The problem and solution slides are probably some of the most important in the deck, and I see the most mistakes here. So the most common ones I see with the problem slide specifically are overwhelming the investor with too many problems, focusing too much time on kind of the problem at large with investors that are already really familiar with animal welfare issues, climate change, et cetera. And then finally, and most importantly, not identifying your specific problem. So when you're writing this slide, think about, why did you start the business? What was missing that made you want to start the business? That's your problem. Your problem's not climate change. It's if there wasn't, an adequate plant-based milkshake out on the market, that was your problem, and you're solving it by producing one that checks all the boxes. So the solution, of course, you're telling the investor how you're solving the problem, but even further, really highlight how you're solving the problem in a profitable way or in a commercially viable way. Excuse me. Tea break. Next, I like to see the product slide. I see a lot of variation on where this slide is placed within the deck, but I think many investors will agree that it's pretty frustrating to get about 2/3 of the way through a deck and not know what the business proposition is. So definitely show investors what you're offering early. This is a good time to include IP as well, and make sure that it's clear and you're being really clear, especially with a food tech company or something really tech heavy, that you're breaking down exactly what your product is and what you're offering. I also see a lot of mistakes on the market slide. I see so many times that companies will say, we plan to capture 5% of the animal-based bacon market, which is generally a highly unrealistic number. It doesn't give you a lot of actual information. What's much more powerful on this slide for me and for a lot of investors that I've spoken with is showing realistic growth over time. So using data that you can back up with growth that you're already seeing or traction that you already have to really demonstrate growth rather than just coming up with a kind of arbitrary number. Competition slide is also incredibly key. Proving differentiation is critical for piquing investor interest. Stand out by not sharing just how you differ from competitors, but how you maintain a sustainable competitive advantage. So what I mean by this is really leaning into those tangible elements, particularly price, gross margin, distribution strategy. Investors at this point are really less concerned that your product is at 100% here and more concerned that you have a clear advantage, such as superior price or process, as we will improve or anticipate improved iterations with increased R&D that will come with more funding. Traction is particularly important for an early stage company without revenue. And similar to the market slide, you really want to lean into any growth that you do have. So this is a great opportunity. If you have great month-to-month growth, definitely highlight that here. And also include things like positive consumer feedback, LOIs. These are important to include in your traction slide. Always have a strong team slide. I cannot stress this enough. Investors know that there will be so many changes to the business, and so they're largely making their investment in you as the founding team. So be sure to take time here, show them who's behind the organization and why your team is uniquely equipped to be successful. And don't forget to also highlight advisors. It's really powerful that investors see that you're able to identify knowledge gaps and surround yourself with the right support to be successful. Financials are really important right now. You know how difficult this current fundraising environment is. Any kind of revenue is very important and always demonstrate a path to profitability. This is also a really key slide for establishing credibility and building trust with the investor. You want to keep your projections very conservative and tied to strategy. Also use visual representations here. I mean, think about your whole deck and the amount of time an investor is actually looking at the slide. It's probably going to be a couple seconds, 30 seconds. So make sure that they're easy to interpret quickly. And it can be a really powerful way to build trust with the investor. Raise details are very important to include, of course, not just kind of the nitty-gritty raise details, but also how you're planning on using the funds. It can be important to demonstrate to investors that you've thought about the key milestones that you plan to hit with this raise. And this is also an opportunity for you to build a little bit of excitement around your opportunity. We call it FOMO, or the fear of missing out. It's definitely an element that's in play, and you can kind of capitalize on that a little bit by sharing, capital already raised in the round, notable investors that are coming into the round. If you're allowed to share that information, that can be powerful for generating some excitement. And finally, your thank you slide, just don't forget to leave the investor with a way to contact you. Okay, so now that you have a robust pitch deck and you're ready to contact investors, ensure that you're contacting the right investors first and curating a targeted audience. You are better off finding firms that are already aligned with what your company does and targeting them, which will save you time and energy. It's in very high demand for all of you entrepreneurs, I know. You can do this by reviewing the firm's website and portfolio ahead of your pitch, checking out articles or recorded panels. And I really want to highlight here that it's important for you to do this for you as well. Remember that investment is a partnership, so you should be also diligencing your investor. Make sure that it's going to be a good one. There's a good foundation for partnership. You are comfortable with it. It is a two-way street, so always keep that in mind when you're looking at investors before they write you any checks. Timing to approach is a really important thing to consider as well. If you're approaching, angel investors who typically co-invest, you might have a lot more success if you already have some notable investors committed to your round, especially a lead investor secured. So be mindful of that. Be thinking about that when you're approaching certain investors. And finally, I mentioned this on a previous slide, but create FOMO. The fear of missing out element is at play in VC, and definitely share things like securing a lead, being talks to notable investors, strong initial traction. Of course, don't be obnoxious. because VCs do talk, so don't burn any bridges. But those are really things that you should be sharing to generate excitement, especially right now when the energy can get a little bit low. And finally, once you have a meeting set, come to the presentation prepared to capitalize on the time and to answer investor questions. Remember, the presentation is a key time to build credibility, so don't blow all of the time you spent putting into your deck and practicing your presentation by being late, having a poor internet connection, etc. Really come ready to impress and be prepared to answer any investor questions. That's really important. Finally, in the spirit of kind of focusing this presentation on standing out in this environment, we asked 5 seasoned investors from our community to provide 2 to 3 tidbits of advice for you. So I'll go through those quickly. Lisa Feria of Straight Out Capital recommends providing proof of consumer market fit. So making sure to highlight evidence that the product proposition works, quality and price specifically. For example, people may like how something tastes, but wouldn't pay 3x versus a conventional product for it once it's on the shelf. And secondly, time frame to exit. It's important for your investor to know how much capital you need to exit. The time frames of exits are extending, so let a company know when you anticipate exit, as that's really important for a lot of investment thesis. Gautam Godwani of Good Startup recommends sticking with a single business model. Most great businesses make most of their money with one business model, so it will demonstrate focus, simplify planning, and generate credibility. And secondly, create credible financial projections. We talked about this earlier, but he even points out listing the financial assumptions up front that go into the model you're using, which I think is a great advice. Mary-Lise Holm from SFV recommends that you use your time with investors wisely. This goes back to kind of what I was chatting about earlier. Don't spend too much time. If you're talking to a mission-aligned investor who's keenly aware of the animal welfare, animal agriculture problems at large, you don't have to spend a lot of time there. And then definitely highlighting any type of revenue that you have and always including projections to break even or profitability. Steve Molino of Clear Current Capital recommends not underestimating the importance of the old school problem and solution slides. So I talked a lot about this earlier, but it's so, so important. Make sure that you are identifying your specific problem and your solution and why it's commercially viable. And he uses the example, if you're a B2B cultivated company, your problem is not climate change. It's whatever part of the cultivated supply chain you're targeting being way too expensive. And your solution should be that alleviates that problem. I love this one as well. Call out the obvious hurdles and lean into them. So each category, plant-based cultivated fermentation, has obvious hurdles. For instance, consumers view plant-based as ultra-processed, and there's a capacity issue for fermentation companies. So call out the obvious hurdle for your company and highlight, for whatever reason, it doesn't apply to you, or your company is able to overcome that. Definitely don't act like the hurdles don't exist, because investors know about them and are actively thinking about them. And finally, prove your differentiation and highlight why it's legitimately meaningful. And particularly when it comes to your deck, he recommends highlighting on the competition slide things in a way that creates an us versus everyone else image. So everyone else is the same and you're the only ones doing things the way that you're doing them. Then highlight why that matters. Being different is one thing. Being different in a way that leads to a commercially viable company is another, and that's really important to point out to investors. Last but not least, Caroline Mack from Big Idea Ventures recommends creating and utilizing your own database of investors. So there are out there that you can pull from, but definitely do your own research and ensure alignment is on thesis. Create your own database of investors and then systematically track who you have reached out to and make sure that's always up to date. And then finally, open and honest communication is key. So stay in touch with investors. Caroline recommends that newsletters are a great tool. Don't burn any bridges, even if it's not a fit right now. Investors want to know what founders are up to for potential later rounds. So remember that kind of key piece of advice. You'll hear it, I'm sure, more than once. You're always raising, even when you're not. So with that, we would love, love, love to connect with you all. We have some resources here to connect with us. Our website, of course, my email address, our Executive Director, Macy Marriott. Please go ahead and email us. Again, the Emerging Growth Consortium, we just launched earlier this year. If you're in emerging growth startup or investor, please reach out there and we can give you more information. And then finally, this QR code at the bottom is for our Glasswell community Discord. We recently launched that as well, and it's really about networking, being a community for investors, founders, leaders to come together and have a place to connect throughout the year. So we host happy hours there, we have events on there, and it's going to be a really fun place as it continues to grow. So there is a little modest annual fee for that. So go ahead and ask us any questions, and that QR code will go to the application to join the Discord. So with that, I'm happy to transition to Q&A. I'll leave the slide up for a moment in case anyone wants to scan that. And yeah, perfect. Okay, it looks like we already have a question up here. That's great. How long should a deck be? That's a great question. I actually recommend having multiple decks, at least 2 decks. So sometimes you'll get on a call with an investor and they'll give you 15 minutes. So you want to make sure that you have, a short deck and then a even longer deck. And that longer deck, can go more into detail. Maybe you have 2 to 3 slides on financials. You have your P&L in there, you have an appendix, etc. And that can go directly into your data room. That can be an important tool to pull out if investors have a lot of questions. You can say, oh, well, I have a more robust deck that I can follow up with after this pitch. But a lot of times you won't get that much time with investors on an actual call. So I would recommend having a 5-minute pitch, a 10-minute pitch, and then kind of if you were to talk all the way through it, maybe a 30-minute deck that goes through really a lot of the details for your business. This question says, have you seen things included that just do not belong in a pitch deck? From Connie. That's a good question. I think I haven't seen a lot of things in the actual deck that haven't belonged there, but what I do see a lot is being reached out to by companies that have nothing to do with Glasswell Syndicate or any of our investors' thesis. So we'll get veterinary technology a lot. We'll get dog collars. We've got like leather dog collars once. So really speaking back to that targeted audience and making sure that you're researching the investor, because it does come across a little silly when one of those comes through and you're like, well, clearly you didn't really look at our website. So I would say less things included in the deck itself that didn't belong there, and more kind of being reached out to by maybe companies that could have avoided that. Which company has the best deck you've ever seen? That is a great question. I think I won't name names necessarily, but I will say that I have been the most impressed by a food tech company that did just a phenomenal job of breaking down their technology. I think it can be really difficult sometimes for really heavy tech companies, especially like B2B companies who are supporting a really critical, like niche part of an industry, to come across to investors who don't necessarily understand it in a really powerful way. And I recently saw a deck that had a phenomenal breakdown of their kind of offering and how they were going to support these B2B businesses, where an investor could come in not knowing anything about the space and be able to identify why they were helpful and why the products that they were putting forward were going to be helpful for the space. Stacy asked, how technical versus big picture should one be with a deck? It really depends on what your product or what your business is. I think erring on so there is a storytelling element, of course, to a deck. And I think this kind of depends on how long you have to pitch. But I think kind of honing in on the profitability, like your path to profitability, how you're going to get there, those sorts of technical elements are really, really important. Maybe if you're a food tech company and you have really, really nitty gritty kind of technical elements, you can just say, like give an example of why it's important, and maybe you can get into the technology after the pitch. But I think there's a balance to be struck versus the big picture storytelling and the technical elements. And Jenny asks, what types of companies are you seeing get investment in this environment? I think I've been seeing more of an interest right now in food tech. I think I've been seeing a lot of investors really interested in those companies that are really going to identify the crux points in cultivated fermentation. There's some really big challenges in those industries, and companies that are targeting some element of that that's going to make a really big difference are the ones that I see investors get most excited about right now. Do pitch decks need to go through a designer? I don't think so. I think that a powerful design can help, your marketing and branding. But if you look at some early decks from really successful companies like Airbnb, and things like that, they're pretty simple. I think for investors, we don't need a lot of fluff. It's really what's in the deck that's more important than anything. So really keeping, if it's going to be a big spend for you to go through a designer, I don't think that's necessary. I think you should really just hone in and be really solid on those key elements that should be in your deck. So kind of what's in it versus how it looks. But of course, that's important. And Joshua Feller says, how has the transition to VC favorable term sheets impact the number of startups pursuing funding in the alternative protein sector? That's a really great question. I actually anticipated that it would be different. I thought we would see a huge number of companies pursuing funding, but actually we have seen companies kind of doubling down and seeing where they can get with the funding that they have. So I think there have been kind of fewer really truly mission-aligned companies coming through. It's been a lot more difficult to find really highly curated deal flow for our pitch events and things like that, because companies are revisiting their strategy and really honing in on exactly what is at the core of their business and what their runway is, how can they extend that without raising more money right now. So that's a really interesting question. Thank you for asking that.
Well, again, Rochelle, I think that you could sit here for an hour and you would just get inundated question after question. Actually, I wanted to add a note to the designer question. So two things. We just raised our entire fund off of a keynote that we designed ourselves. And so I think if you have some sort of eye for design in your team already, especially if you're using Canva. So if anyone's not already using Canva, you have to. So like all of our content through VWS, all of my joyful VC content, we use Canva for, and it really brings like graphic design to the everyday person. If you don't have that element though, I really consider working on Upwork. So if you haven't used Upwork before, you can get graphic designers all around the world. We've worked with several that have done our decks for many, many years, and really like find some great, great work there. So that is my little quick pitch. Rochelle, plug something. Tell us what you want to plug.
I'm gonna replug our Discord community. I'm just so excited about it. We just launched a series actually with Joshua Filler, who's gonna be doing kind of like Feel Your Monthly Fridays, from December through March or May. And those are going to be really, really cool. We're going to bring in guests, and it's going to be a really great community event. So definitely check that out. Email me if you have questions, and hopefully I will see you on Discord.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, everybody. Let's give a little virtual round of applause for Rochelle, and we will see you again soon. How are the workshops? What do y'all think? Are you guys getting so much interesting data and information? I'm actually screenshotting stuff. These are our own workshops. I've seen them before, and I'm still screenshotting everything because there really is like so much great data, so many interesting things going on in all these conversations. Our goal here is to prepare you to be a part of this industry, whether you want to learn to invest, whether you want to start a company, all the nitty gritty.